Woe to the city guilty of bloodshed. She is full of lies. She is filled with plunder. She has hoarded her spoil. The chariot drivers will crack their whips. The chariot wheels will shake the ground. The chariot horses will gallop. The war chariots will bolt forward. The charioteers will charge ahead. Their swords will flash, and their spears will glimmer. There will be many people slain. There will be piles of the dead and countless casualties, so many that people will stumble over the corpses. Thus is part of the burden of Nineveh given to Nahum as a vision in Nahum chapter 3 in the first 3 verses. Nahum is a prophet of Judah speaking sometime between 663 and 612 BC regarding the fate of Nineveh and the Assyrians, the great mighty empire of the day, the great metropolis, the great cosmopolitan city that seems to be a permanent fixture. It's been around for thousands of years and has a very strong moment at this time. In Nahum 1 and 2, Nahum has been demonstrating the kinds of things here that we see pronounced as a woe at the beginning of chapter 3. He's envisioning what's going to happen to Nineveh. And so he proclaims this woe. He envisions how the chariot drivers are going to come around, and all the army and all of their weaponry and things of that nature. He's envisioning that it is now going to be done unto Nineveh and the Assyrians as the Assyrians had done to so many throughout the ancient Near Eastern world for at least the past 200 years. It's a very powerful, very visceral picture, something that's not very pleasant, of course, but it is very sobering. This is what would happen, and the time would come where this would take place, that the chariots of the Medes and the Babylonians would go through the city, and all of their soldiers, they would take all kinds of stuff, and there would be bodies piled up over all the area that they had gone through in wanton slaughter. And all of this, as terrible as it sounds, as horrible as it would have been to experience, is God's judgment on Nineveh because she is guilty of bloodshed. Not just bloodshed here, it's blood guilt. Blood guilt is an incredibly serious thing in the Old Covenant. Still should be in the New Covenant. Blood guilt in Deuteronomy chapter 21 is something that needs to be expiated, even if no one knows what happened. If there's a body in a field and it's closest to your village elders have to go and offer a sacrifice and say, we don't know what happened. We are offering this sacrifice to atone and to expiate the blood guilt from the land so that we don't have to suffer the consequences of that blood guilt. We can only imagine the blood guilt that the Assyrians had piled up for itself with the indiscriminate slaughter that it had participated in all over, from Egypt to Elam to Urartu to the areas of Asia Minor, including, of course, Israel and Judah in that time period. And, of course, they had so much plunder. They had so much spoil. They had taken so much gold and silver from all the nations and had stored it up, and now it was there ready for the taking by these people, their enemies. And so thus Nahum has begun to pronounce woe. His woe continues in verse 4. Because you have acted like a wanton prostitute, a seductive mistress who practices sorcery, who enslaves nations by her harlotry, and entices peoples by their sorcery. I am against you, declares Yahweh of heaven's armies. I will strip off your clothes. I will show your nakedness to the nations, and your shame to the kingdoms. I will pelt you with filth. I will treat you with contempt. I will make you a public spectacle. Everyone who sees you will turn away from you in disgust. They will say, Nineveh has been devastated. Who will lament for her? There will be no one to comfort you. This is an extraordinary passage, because we see here, really powerfully for the first time in this way, a major city, cosmopolitan city center, being described as the prostitute. There's two things going on. First of all, yes, there is already a tendency in Israelite prophecy to speak of prostitution. The way that we're used to it is what we see in Hosea, that the Israelites, by serving other gods, have played the harlot. They have been prostitutes to other gods. The logic there is pretty compelling. The Israelites think that they are just covering their bases, but what they're really doing is dishonoring God, Yahweh, by honoring these other gods. And so just like their wives, if their wives went and prostituted around, it would bring shame upon their wives and them. That is why that potent metaphor is being used to say, your behavior spiritually is like prostitution. This is what the shame and dishonor and the consequences that are going to flow from it are because you have done this. That particular matter is not as much concern here, because the Assyrians are committing idolatry because they're Assyrians. If they lead other nations around them into idolatry, that's what they were doing anyway, with the exception of Israel and Judah. And perhaps part of the critique here is how the Assyrians did induce the Israelites and Judahites to turn away from Yahweh to some degree or another and to serve Assyrian gods, or according to the Syrian pattern. Witness Ahaz taking the dimensions of an Assyrian altar to have built and installed in the Temple of Jerusalem in 2 Kings. But the idea here, of course, is that how would Nineveh present itself? Cities are generally gendered as feminine because of grammar, because of all kinds of reasons. And so Nineveh would be seen as a she, and that she would be a queen, right? She would want to consider herself regal, honorable, powerful, bedecked with jewels and crowns and the scepter of authority. But the way that God is presenting her is as a wanton prostitute, the exact opposite side of that scale of honor, dishonor, of shame. A very shameful profession, a very shameful situation. And we're not going to get into the challenges here. Well, understanding prostitution is a very old profession, how a lot of times prostitution involves women who are being exploited and oppressed, and they're being further exploited and oppressed in that situation, that the consequences really come from the Johns that are going and using the services of the prostitutes, and the double standard that would exist in the ancient world, where there would be far less approbation and condemnation for those who visit prostitutes than is heaped upon the prostitutes themselves. But the idea here is not that she is some kind of being forced into it, so to speak. That this is something that she's reveling in. And she's reveling in it because she has enchanted people with her sorcery. Maybe there's some actual sorcery going on. Maybe some actual sexual morality going on. But the main ways in which Nineveh is going to be acting this way is in the inducement to participate in her economy, to go out and to obtain lots of resources, to, of course, use the power that the Assyrians have accumulated to leverage it to their advantage economically as well as politically. And so all the nations are trading with her, whether they want to or not. They are forced to come to recognition of the gods of Assyria and things of that nature, so we can understand the reversal going on here. Nineveh wants to be a queen. God condemns her as a prostitute. And just like what is expressed here, what do you do with the prostitute in the ancient world? You expose, humiliate, and shame them. You would bring them out in public, you would strip them naked, and everybody would see their nakedness. Everybody would be dishonoring and shaming her. That's what's going to happen in Nineveh. And that's what happens, and God does that through the armies of the Medes and the Babylonians, who come in and destroy the city and plunder all of her treasures and enslave its inhabitants. And everybody will turn away in disgust like they do to a prostitute. No one's going to mourn and lament. No one's going to feel bad for Nineveh because of how much Nineveh has done this to everybody else. What's interesting is how, did you even recognize or know that this illustration is here in Nahum? Assyria and Nahum have been memory hold. We don't remember them. We're hearing so much about the Roman Empire and how people think about the Roman Empire. Well, the Roman Empire was built on the foundation of what the Greeks had been doing, who found it on the basis of what the Persians were doing, who founded it based on what the Babylonians were doing, and the Babylonians got the idea from the Assyrians. What the Neo-Assyrian Empire does provides the foundation for everything else, and it is a powerful, ironic testimony to what Nahum is prophesying, that we have basically all but forgotten Nineveh, Assyria, and even Nahum himself. The next great power, the next great cosmopolitan city that is going to get this kind of treatment will be Babylon. And it's important to recognize that Nahum is doing this at this time for important reasons. Yes, there had been, Ur and Akkad and Babylon in southern Mesopotamia. There had been Damascus and Tyre in the Levant. There had been Memphis and Thebes in Egypt. These are all very prominent, powerful cities, economic centers, but they weren't the kind of center of empire that Nineveh was, where the Assyrians were ruling and having their own rulers over all the other nations, and had brought in all these people from all over the empire, many of whom did not want to be there. They had been brought there. And maybe there were some who had come there because of all of the opportunities that seemed to be presented. It's a very different situation. Babylon's going to continue in this trend. The prophets actually don't speak of Babylon as the whore, but virgin Babylon is going to be degraded, and in Isaiah and in Jeremiah, that will the cup of her wine she will make others drink and stagger. It will be John in Revelation. God in Christ will show to John in Revelation chapter 17 and 18 the kind of consolidation of these illustrations about Nineveh and Babylon to create whore Babylon, who rides upon the beast in a drunken stagger, making all the nations drink of the wine of her sexual morality and sorcery, and she is drunk on the blood of the saints. This is representing Rome, the great pagan oppressive power of the first century, the most recent Nineveh and Babylon. The illustration continues consistently. And to this day, the major centers of powerful kingdoms or nations, even democracies, tend to take on the same type of attitudes, do the same kind of sorcery and sexual morality, and have people drink the cup of the such things, in the sharing in the political and economic might of this nation, to the, of course, advantage of that nation and of that city. And there is a lesson to be learned there, and the people of God do well to be careful with it and to keep away and keep out from her. But Nahum will continue in verse 8. You are no more secure than Thebes. She was located on the banks of the Nile. The waters surrounded her. Her rampart was the sea. The water was her wall. Cush and Egypt had limitless strength. Put and the Libyans were among her allies. Yet she went into captivity as an exile. Even her infants were smashed to pieces at the head of every street. They cast lots for her nobility. All her dignitaries were bound with chains. You too will act like drunkards. You too will go into hiding. You will seek refuge from the enemy. This comparison would be insulting to Assyrians who heard it. Because, yes, Thebes in Egypt fell after it had not been sacked for 2,000 years. It had been about 1,500 years as the center of power there in Egypt, either Upper Egypt or all of Egypt in general, since 2000 BC. The only people ever to plunder it were the Egyptians themselves. And the Cushites had been ruling in it. The Libyan kings of the north had ruled in it. Punt is down in Somaliland, Eritrea. They've got this regional thing there. And of course, Egypt's great strength is its geography, where it's got inhospitable desert on two sides. It's surrounded by the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, which make armies really hard to come and attack it. It's only two places it is really easily attacked. The First Cataract to the south, and from the Sinai Peninsula to the northeast, has choke points that you can defend strongly and easily. And yet it fell. But it fell to the Assyrians. So the Assyrians are like, how can you possibly compare us when we were the ones who did that to them? Well, this would become a very ironic and galling and humiliating comparison, of course, once it was a fait accompli. Once the Chaldean, Babylonians, and the Medes had come in and conquered Nineveh, because it had happened to the Assyrians just as the Assyrians had done to Egypt. Their defenses were compromised, the situation turned out poorly. And in 663, Ashurbanipal stood on top of the world and dominated Egypt. By 615, 612, 605, his great-grandchildren were gone from the throne. There was no more Assyria. Nineveh was removed. This is one of those powerful messages to imperial powers. Every imperial power wants to tell itself we are well defended, we will endure, we'll survive. But yet everyone will fall. Babylon would fall. The Persians fell. The Greeks fell. Rome fell. America at some time will fall. China will fall. Russia will fall. Every nation will go through this. And you don't know when and how. It is a call to humility, to contrition, lamentation, and repentance. Nahum continues. All your fortifications will be like fig trees with their first ripe fruit. If they are shaken, their figs will fall into the mouth of the eater. Your warriors will be like women in your midst. The gates of your land will be wide open to your enemies. Fire will consume the bars of your gates. Draw yourselves with water for a siege. Strengthen your fortifications. Trample the mud and tread the clay. Make mud bricks to strengthen your walls. There the fire will consume you. The sword will cut you down. It will devour you like the young locust would. So he again is now starting to taunt a little bit. Nahum's taunting the Assyrians. Looking at how what had been done, they had done to others, will be done to them. Now it's time for the Assyrians to be trying to hastily make mud bricks to fix the wall. And imagining that as that's happening, the soldiers are coming in from the Babylonians and the Medes and killing the people making these bricks, or they're dying in the fire that are being set all around them. That their warriors are in turn like women. They're going to completely lose all confidence, just as the other warriors, that they would accuse them of everybody else having done that for hundreds of years beforehand. They would all be devastated. And the fig tree illustration is all the more twisting and ironic. Sennacherib planted fig trees all over the avenues of Nineveh with the idea that people could take and eat the figs. Again, nice benevolent thing, but now the whole city is going to be like that fig tree, easily shaken, and everybody gets the fruit, and everybody runs. And the idea that the sword will cut them and devour them like the locust. What does the locust do? Those grasshoppers get together, they go out and they eat everything. And Nahum's going to continue that illustration as he concludes. Multiply yourself like the young locust. Multiply yourself like the flying locust. Increase your merchants more than the stars of heaven. They are like the young locust that sheds its skin and flies away. Your courtiers are like locusts. Your officials are like a swarm of locusts. They encamp in the walls on a cold day, yet when the sun rises they fly away, and no one knows where they are. Your shepherds are sleeping, O king of Assyria. Your officers are slumbering. Your people are scattered like sheep on the mountains. There is no one to regather them. Your destruction is like an incurable wound. Your demise is like a fatal injury. All who hear what has happened to you will clap their hands for joy, for no one ever escaped your endless cruelty. So there's a taunt here. Nahum's saying that they should multiply like the locusts, to increase their merchants, because, this is a taunt because the merchants, the courtiers, and the officials are looking like locusts in another way. What do locusts do? Again, they come in, they devour everything, and then when everything's devoured, they leave. Where you can imagine a cold morning where they can't move, but then when it warms up, then they go. That's the way these merchants, officials, and courtiers are. They are taking advantage. When there is greenery in Nineveh, when they can make money, when there is advantage to them, when they get benefit, they're there and they're swarming the place. But now that there is problems, they've all scattered. They're all gone. They are gone to the four winds to preserve and survive themselves. Meanwhile, the shepherds are sleeping. The king's officials are not prepared for this. No one is ready for what's going on. Maybe Nahum's seeing the kind of internecine civil war that's going on right after the death of Ashurbanipal, where they've all turned inward on themselves at the very wrong moment. It's like an incurable wound. They have been struck down mortally, but they aren't recognizing it. They're in that period between the death, the strike of the spear or sword or what have you, and the moment when death actually comes. And they don't even realize they're in that situation. But that will not somehow delay or alleviate what will actually happen. And at the very end, we've got that last moment of schadenfreude. Everyone's going to hear about the destruction of Nineveh and Assyria, are going to clap. They're going to be excited because no one had escaped their cruelty. No one was going to miss them. And as we said, no one would miss them because we've memory hold Assyria. We've memory hold Nineveh and Nahum. No one knows much about this. We don't talk much about it. We focus much more on Babylon, on the Romans, not nearly as much on the Assyrians. The burden of Nineveh, which Nahum saw, has thus been fulfilled and satisfied. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ethan, work with the Adventist Church of Christ. We are Christians of non-denominational church in Los Angeles, and we'd love to be a further encouragement service to you. Do you have any questions or comments about Nahum chapter 3 or anything in Nahum? Love to hear about them. Let us know in the comments. Please continue our conversation. We'd love for you to subscribe to us where you found us. If we can be of any further assistance, can we pray for you? Would you like to meet with us? Can we study with you? Any way we can be a benefit or encouragement, please reach out to us. You can find us on our website at adventistchurchofchrist.org. You can find us on various social media. And just reach out to us. We'd love to be of assistance. And may the Lord bless and keep you until we're able to meet again.